Last week, somebody in the chat asked me what I was like as a kid. You ready to get unbothered? Let's get unbothered.
Everything bothers him.
He's unbothered.
He calls it unbothered, but that's what's cute because everything bothers him. He's bothered. I'm a botherina.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Unbothered by Rivera. That's right, it's Unbothered by Rivera. I'm your host, Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. I should have been more prepared for that, but here's the deal, you guys. I got asked that last week in the chat, which for anybody that's watching this at any other time, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time is when I am in the chat on every Sunday. I didn't think I said that right. But, every Sunday I am in the chat and we have a good time. We have our regulars. I don't want to mention anybody's names because I'll feel bad if I leave a name off. So that's the only reason I'm not going to mention names, because I can mention several names off the top of my head. And I appreciate you guys for being here every week. And, but yeah, so if anybody ever wants to watch while I'm in the chat, it's cool, it's fun, I enjoy it. But Sundays at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Anyway, somebody asked that in the chat about me as a kid. And it's kind of weird, me as a kid, because I was very, very entertaining for my parents. And I really feel like, even if it's not true, you should convince your child that you could not wait for them to be born, because that was my actual situation. I have 3 sisters and I am the only boy in a Latino American family. And when you're the only boy in a Latino American family, or a Latino family in general, for the most part, you're treated like gold. And my parents were very clear with me from my earliest memories of them talking to me about the fact that they had tried for me. They really wanted me to be here. So I always felt really loved. I always felt like, and don't get me wrong, me and my parents have had our ups and downs. See the video about my birthday this year. Which, like I told you guys, I wasn't, like, if you saw the video about my birthday, you saw when I said that I wasn't going to be mad about it. I'm not going to hold a grudge about it. I don't. And I don't have any, like, to me, that's just another memory now, but I will make fun of it or have fun with that situation. But no, when I was growing up, I definitely would get in trouble sometimes. I was a little bit of a problem child for a while. And when I was in my early 20s, my parents had to completely cut me off for a little bit there. And, I was doing S work. So when they cut me off, it wasn't like financially, or I was already doing my own thing. And so I wasn't at all worried about needing them for money or whatever. But they just knew that I was partying too much and I was doing a bunch of stuff that I didn't need to be doing. And then I would try to come to them with my problems when everything would fall apart. But it was always easy for me to, like, because sometimes I would mess up financially. And even though I was making a lot of money, I just was spending it all the time. It was ridiculous the way that I was able to spend money. And sometimes I think about it now and I'm like, wow, you were really nuts in the way that you did things. Because it was just wasting it. It wasn't even like buying a bunch of extravagant things. It literally was wasting money. Everybody drinks, everybody, or buying everybody drinks. And I didn't have a huge circle, but sometimes, we'd all be partying and some new people. And like, there were so many times that, that was my thing, was just, kind of being that guy. So, like one time I remember I was partying with this ex of mine and we had been on one for several days and I hadn't thought about the fact that rent was due. And so all of a sudden I realize it's like 2 days before the first. And so the guy I was with at the time, he didn't have a job, you know, because I preferred it that way. I had him driving me around to go make money. That's what I had him doing. And I needed him around when I needed him, was the way I felt about it. So I preferred he not work. He worked for a short while, but the money wasn't worth it because, you know, he wasn't skilled in anything. And so it was just like, well, why are you away from me when you could be helping me with things, which I don't really know what I needed so much help with, but apparently I did. And I was like, when I could just, you know, pay for everything, and kind of you're losing money for us by working this job. And so, but so it's 2 days before the first, and I realized that I didn't have the rent money. And there was a part of me that panicked in a way, I guess you could say, as much as I panic about things, because I haven't ever been that much of a panic person my whole life. I just don't really, I don't know if I don't think it's productive, or I don't know if it's just not really wired into my DNA that way, but whatever the deal is. So what I did was I ended up calling this guy that I used to do calls for, and he was in Houston, and I told him, like, you know, because I'd been partying for, like I said, 3 days. And so my throat was sore from, like, you know, if you party with certain things, it'll dry you out and make your throat sore, and you're not drinking, you're not staying hydrated. And so, you know, it was, my throat was sore. And so I was able to use that in my dealing with him on the phone. His name was George. I would say his last name. I wonder whatever happened to him. But his name was George, and he lived in Houston. And I called him, and I was like, George, I'm not doing good right now. And he was like, oh my God, what's the matter? And so I was telling him, you know, like, just how rough life was, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and, you know, that kind of thing. And which was, I don't feel bad about running that line, because it was halfway true. You know, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I needed rent in 2 days. And so, long story short, he flew me out to Houston. He gave me a certain amount of money before I left to Houston. And then the deal was, because he didn't want me to rip him off, you know, once I got back from Houston, or before I got on the plane to get back from Houston, then he was going to give me the rest of the money that he was supposed to give me. And it was a decent amount of money. So, you know, I flew out there, and I hung out with him, and you know, he wanted me to move to Houston, and I obviously wasn't going to move to Houston. So what I did was, he wanted to show me around Houston, and I wasn't sure what I would do if I was in Houston anyway. I was kind of halfway checking it out, but I knew I wasn't going to leave Vegas, and especially to go be around him all the time, or whatever he was trying to propose. And so I ended up stripping, literally stripping. That's the only time in my life, let me fix this, that I ever stripped before, was in Houston. And I went to, there was a circuit there at the time. It was like JR's one night and the other one another night. And, you know, there were like several clubs you could go to and strip. And I just, you know, I was so used to doing the other kind of work, which is similar in a way. But when you strip, you have to actually be in a location, and for the hours of the show, which is like 4 hours or whatever. And so I didn't like it. And because I was just like, why am I working this hard? Why are my legs sore from dancing when usually I don't have to work like this to make money? And so I didn't like it. And I had always thought I would like that, you know, if I were stripping, but it just wasn't fun. It wasn't good. But yeah, so then, and we got in this weird thing before I left, you know, because he was dating a guy, and that was his thing, you know, since he wasn't, because he was just trying to help me out, is the way that he was trying to sell it or put it. So it didn't matter to him that his boyfriend would feel whatever way about it or whatever, because he didn't plan to do anything with me anyway. He just was helping me out. And so, you know, and his boyfriend ended up getting weird at a point, and like my vibe was, I do not want your boyfriend. Like, I'm so glad that you are with him, because now he's being above board with me, but I'm still getting this money. Like, he's not, because obviously when I met him and was doing calls for him, then it wasn't obviously that, so I was I didn't want his boyfriend. And so, his boyfriend got all weird and whatever. But, I didn't care because I just needed to make that money. But anyway, my point is, growing up, like, since I was so secure in the way that my parents felt about me, and also, since I was super fun, I always had a good personality. There were times when I was shy when I was younger, but obviously I wasn't shy with my parents. And so I used to do silly things to make them laugh all the time. Like, they were my first audience. Like, I remember one of the things that I did the most for them was my impression of, like, eating spinach as Popeye. I would do the go, 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 and then I would, like, like, show them my muscles, and, I would be like Popeye. And so I remember doing that for them. And then I used to call my dad sometimes just to be silly, because, Papa is the way you would say dad in Spanish, and I would call him papitas, which is like, I think what they refer to as papitas, in, like, if it's a true Mexican, not like me, a coconut, then it's usually, papitas are chips, I believe. Papas fritas are fries, I think. I forget, when I was younger, I understood and lightweight spoke a lot of Spanish. I was never fluent at all, but a lot more Spanish. And certain words I only knew in Spanish, because when you grow up in a Latino household, even though my parents, like, there's certain words that we still, a lot of cases use only in Spanish, or like that's the only way we refer to things. And like towel is toalla, and a lot of times we'll say toallas, or my mom will be like, don't take my toallas, that's my good toalla, or like stuff like that. Yeah, and so, but yeah, I really did. But at the same time, which I've talked about this before, like, I was convinced that I was supposed to be a girl in my head, and it's because of something my sister told me when I was super young. So there was that going on at the same time. Then there was also the fact that I didn't necessarily fit in with the other boys because I wasn't very athletic, and that, I didn't get to spend a lot of time with my dad because my dad had to work so much. And so, like, the kind of stuff that, like, your dad would teach you in a lot of cases, I didn't really learn from my dad, like how to throw a ball, or like, like athletics, that kind of stuff. It just, it wasn't a thing that was ever really factored in. And so I had trouble relating to other boys when I was super young, like kindergarten and stuff like that. And that's a lot of what led to me being ostracized by the other boys when I was super young. Was, I didn't realize, because I grew up with sisters, and so obviously from like the time I was born until I got into kindergarten, I had been around, with very little exception, a friend here or there, or a family friend, something like that, the son of a family friend. But with very little exception, I was always with my sisters. And so when I first showed up to school, and what's relatable to me is hanging out with the girls and jump rope with them and playing Barbies with them. And then the boys come around, which we didn't live in a politically correct society at all at that point. And the boys come around the corner and see me playing Barbies with the girls, because some of the girls had dolls at school. And they're like, that's for girls. And just like, led to me being literally ostracized from the boys from a long time for a long time. You know, I didn't know how to play soccer at that time. A lot of people did play soccer in my school. And yeah, so I like that part of my life was kind of depressing, like when I was outside of the house, you know, because when I'd go home, then everything was great again, especially in those years when I was super young, you know, because I hadn't become any kind of problem child or anything. I was really a really good boy, like is what I was. My mom raised me to be very respectful. I've talked about it before. I had a kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Brown was her name. I hope she died of cancer. She was very mean to me, and you know, I don't say that lightly, and I do mean it, because she was very mean to me, and I will never for the life of me understand why a person would become a kindergarten teacher if they're going to be mean to certain kids, you know. And she was like very mean to me. Like I said, I kind of am ashamed of myself for holding on to it for this long, but at the same time, I just feel like, no, she was a terrible person. She was just terrible, and I was, you know, little, and I was already having a hard enough time, you know, because at school I felt like I didn't fit in. And the girls were super nice to me. You know, the girls were very nice to me. But I think that when you're little like that, you really want to belong with the other people, the other boys, if you're a boy, or the other girls, if you're a girl. I think you do want to be able to relate to, you know, what's technically supposed to be your group. But I just didn't. And so I'm already having a hard enough time with the other boys. And then the teachers not being nice to me and making it a point to be mean to me. And there were a couple others that she was mean to, but like she just was really not nice to me. And so I remember when I was young like that, a lot of like lying to my mom, you know, like when she'd ask me how school was, because I didn't want to I was embarrassed, you know, because this lady didn't like me, and I felt like I had done something wrong. And so it was bad for me. It was pretty terrible. You know, that's why I feel the way I do about her, cuz I think it is evil. Like I know that I'm a person that doesn't have the patience to teach children. I know that about myself. You know, I just my nephews and nieces, when they're around, you know, or when they were young, I was fine with them. We were cool and I loved them. They're my nephews and nieces. But at the same time, I don't have the patience for like young children, especially like that. And so I feel like if you know that you're not going to be good, then you shouldn't do it. Like teaching is one job that I don't think just anybody should take because they need to make money. That's one job where I really feel like you should like kids, you know. And so like that was hard for me. And then like first grade, I had Miss Grenzo, and I absolutely loved Miss Grenzo. I thought she was the best person in the world, and we learned about dinosaurs, and she really liked me, and she liked that I was so interested in the things that she would teach me. And sometimes on recess I would sit and bother Miss Grenzo, you know, because sometimes, you know, the teachers would rotate who would watch us at recess, you know. And then, so like sometimes I'd go stand near her and just talk to her for a while. And I really liked her. But it wasn't until like maybe fifth grade, I think, that I really started like being able to blend well with the other boys. Like people were a lot nice to me once I got into like third grade. I remember feeling a lot more chill about everything in school not being stressful. But it wasn't until fifth that I really began to like have friends where I felt like, you know, well, like my when I was super young, like kindergarten and stuff like that, I had friends, and they were like, you know, some of the popular kids, you could say, as far as what's it called went. But it was like one of those situations where sometimes I'd be friends with somebody like that, you know, that all the other kids liked or whatever. And then they'd kind of be mean to me when other people were around. So like after school, they'd invite me to their house and stuff. And my mom was cool about letting me sometimes go to their houses. I wasn't allowed to be anywhere too much because my mom was like, you know, you're a baby, basically. You need to, for the most part, be home. But she was cool about letting me go visit with people sometimes and ride my bike and that kind of stuff. And that's how I spent a lot of my time, you know, was like riding my bike and staying away from everybody. And then at a super young age, I also got like into watching stand-up comedy. And it made my life very happy, you know, and that's one of the things that I like about doing actual stand-up. Is it really does make people happy, you know, and like just to get off that a little bit, like I know that some people are feeling a particular way about the content that I'm making on my main channel lately. I try to make it as fun as possible, but I think that there are some important things that need to be talked about in regards to race in this country, and also more specifically in the dynamic between, you know, black people and everybody else. And so I've been making more stuff like that. And like I said, I'm making it more and more fun all the time, which is a part of the problem for some people, is because I do make things fun, and nothing makes people angrier than when you're able to have fun with a topic that they think is supposed to be completely serious. But I've done the same thing with the trans and LGBT stuff. You know, I don't go any harder at the black community, and it's a particular part of the black community. That's the other thing a lot of people aren't getting right now, is that I'm not saying all black people are like that, or that's not what I'm pointing out. But I'm also not going to be able to say it as many times as some people will want to hear it. But anyway, my point is, a lot of what I do, if people are paying attention, is really try to make people happy, is really try to say things in the funniest way possible in this crazy world that we're living in. Because that was a huge part of my escape when I was younger, you know, was just having stand-up comedy to watch. And that was in the 80s comedy boom, so it was everything, you know, it was all the great comics that you ever wanted to see were on TV all the time. And my parents had no rules as far as what I could listen to. As far as watching things, I could never watch a movie that was as dirty as the things that they would talk about in some of the stand-up I would watch. Because remember, that's the days of Andrew Dice Clay. My parents had no problem with me watching Andrew Dice Clay. My parents had no problem with me watching Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy. Absolutely any stand-up comedian I wanted to watch, I could watch. And my parents, I think they just liked that it made me so happy, you know, because I have a super loud laugh, and I've always been like a good laugher since I was little. So I think they did like, you know, that they'd hear me just laughing in the other room. And I also really liked watching pro wrestling, you know, which I know people can make a million jokes, and I've even made jokes about that, like, you know, now I'm gay. You know, but yeah, and so it was this mix for me of, because, you know, like I said, sometimes the boys that I was friends with would be mean to me just because other boys would want to be mean to me. And so it was the peer pressure thing, you know? And so, like, that part did kind of suck, you know, but really at the same time, I think it was very good for me because, like, now I'm not a person that needs people all the time. Like, I don't need people to be around me all the time. Actually, I prefer that I don't have a lot of people around me most of the time. I prefer a lot of times that I have nobody around me. And I think that that's a good thing because, you know, in real life, like, people talk about the loneliness epidemic that's happening right now in the country. And I don't deal with that You know, I mean, there's times when I miss specific people, but for me, and I'm not judging anybody if you are a person that gets lonely. I get that that's very real for some people. And that's where I am probably a little more empathetic than a lot of people would figure me for being, is when it comes to people having to deal with loneliness. You know, I mean, like, because I don't deal with loneliness. I will, like I said, sometimes miss a specific person. Like, a lot of you know that I'm friends with Leonarda. If you're not familiar with Leonarda Joni is a stand-up comedian that I've been friends with since I first moved to Austin. And we just became close right away. And I know some of her fans wouldn't necessarily appreciate that I'm friends with her, or that she's friends with me, I should say. And I know that maybe some of my fans wouldn't appreciate that I'm friends with her. But it's one of those friendships that it's a non-negotiable for me. We're friends, and I don't care what she says. Like, sometimes people hit me up and because she says some crazy things, you know, but so do I. I mean, like, it's like when you're two people like me and her, you really can't draw lines for what the other one can and can't get away with, because both of us are out there, you know. So it's just kind of like, it would just be like, you have a lot of nerve. And we both, you know, but it's like an unspoken thing between us. That is like, we would never have to have that kind of conversation, because what would we say? Like, you've gone too far. It's like, okay, well, I've been meaning to address that because you've gone too far as well. And then it's just sort of like, all right, well, I guess good chat, you know, like what else is new, you know? But so every once in a while I miss her, but she's out of town, and I'm the kind of friend that, if I miss you and then we just have a good phone conversation, even if it's a short one, you know, 10, 20 minutes, something like that, I'm fine. I feel like I got to hang out with you and I'm great again. But just in general, loneliness is not my thing, you know? And then, like, I have my friends, and the other thing that people don't really understand about the way my life works is they think that everybody co-signs to everything that I say. You know, I've had people try to pressure people out of being my friend and be kind of like, well, how can you be friends with him when he says this and when he says that? And it's just sort of like, well, what does that have to do with me? Because, you know, like, and that's my friends feeling that way and not really taking the pressure from people, because what these people don't understand is that just because I talk about certain things in my videos, or I'll share certain things on my social media, or I'll really drive certain points home as a public person, that doesn't mean that that's all I'm talking about in person-to-person conversation. It doesn't mean it's any of what I talk about in some of my conversations. Like I've mentioned to you guys before, that my best friend, Derek Quisha, he is very much lefty. And like, I don't talk to him about any of the stuff that I talk about on social media or that kind of, we just don't. And it's not in a way like where we're dancing around it or it's this elephant in the room. It's just, there's no reason for us to talk about that. And that's the other thing that I don't think people will really factor in, is because I am able to make videos and express my views and go on social media and say whatever I want. I don't feel the need to talk about that same stuff when I'm not doing that, because it's like I already got to have my complete say on that when I made that 20-minute video, or when I made the Facebook post, or everything, when I was on X. Everything I did during that day might have been in a roundabout way about that. And then that'll lead people to being like, this is just for money. You say, I don't say things that I don't mean just for money. I don't say things that I don't mean ever. Like, I will say things in a way that sometimes is what some would consider careless, but it's just because, like I told you guys a few seconds ago, I'm trying to say everything in the most entertaining way possible. So even if it's not always the funniest way possible, as long as it's entertaining. So whether that's, you know, kind of bitchy delivery, or whether that's like a snotty like, almost elitist delivery. Whatever it is to get the job done is what I'm going to do as far as delivery goes. But, that's like, I plan to address that in an upcoming video, not to give any spoilers, but, where, like, the other day I made the video about James Charles, and somebody hit me up and was like, how is it you can say that, talk about the EBT people and that you don't care that they lost their EBT and whatever. And it's like, one, I never said that exactly. Like, if you pay attention to my videos that I've made about EBT specifically, and I don't mean the EBT community, I mean just EBT as far as that being a topic, which will go into the EBT community, because again, I'm trying to say everything in the most like entertaining way possible. But if you notice, what I say in those videos is that I definitely do understand when it comes to public assistance and sometimes people needing it for a little bit here and there. That's what it's there for. I've said that before. When it comes to the elderly, people that are permanently disabled, or, even like, even if they look able-bodied, because I've known people that looked able-bodied for the most part, but really did have certain disabilities that made it so they weren't able to work. So they always, and the people that I knew like that would usually find some sort of thing that they could do, but their options were very limited. And one thing that I don't like that the government does, and I wish I was a person that was in position to kind of be able to change that, even though I have no interest in being a politician, and you won't see me running for anything ever in my life. I just don't have the time, the patience, the personality for it, as far as dealing with people that, it's like, are being difficult, and sometimes people are crooked, and like, I'm not a person that could operate in that world. I just couldn't. But like one thing that I've always hated is that if people make over a certain amount of money, then they cut off their benefits. And I could understand if that was a lot of money, because at that point you don't need the benefits. But there have been times where people have told me, like, basically what they're not allowed to make over, or their benefits get cut. And it's kind of like, well, you're already kind of starving with your unemployment, or it's not unemployment, but a disability. You're already kind of starving with that as it is. So then you get maybe just above starving, and then they're going to cut off your benefits. Well, if you make more money and they cut off your benefits, in a lot of cases, they're not just cutting off your spending money. They're also going to kick you out of, Section 8, which is paying for your housing, or the majority of your housing. I know people that have been paying as little as like $50 for the place that they live. And so it's kind of like you're not really letting these people help themselves out as much as they could possibly help themselves out. And maybe if they didn't have that threat of, doing just over starving and then having everything swept out from under them, maybe they could get to a point where they make enough money that really they didn't need it, and then they legitimately wouldn't need it and they wouldn't be screwed. And so I've had a problem with that. But my point is, I don't begrudge people, even like young families or even a single person. If you just end up in a tough spot and you need public assistance, I don't have a problem with that. My problem is the people that want to live on it forever and have figured out how to game the system, where they are living high on the hog, which we've all seen. Like, when you're spending over $1,000 a month on groceries because you've got EBT and you figured out how to game the system, which is something we've literally seen on social media. Yeah, I don't support that. And you're like, it's not even the healthy food. It's like, check out my haul where I got, and it's like all very, very fresh. So yeah, when those people get cut off, I'm like, yeah, I don't care about that. Like, you got over for a long time. Now it's time for you to figure it out. And that's what it is. But that doesn't mean that I'm completely heartless towards that altogether. You know, like the people being on public assistance. It doesn't mean I think that people should be starving in the streets. That's not it. And so when people say things like that, I feel like you're not listening to me. You're just hearing what you want to hear because you want to be offended. And that doesn't really have anything to do with me, you know, because people try to put these things on me. And it's like, okay, well, if I didn't actually say it, don't tell me what you translated my words to. Take my actual words and do them that way. Because even though, like I said, I will say things in the most colorful way possible, at the same time, I am saying what it is I mean. So you can take my words as they are and translate that to your own. Well, not really, because a lot of people's thinking is so different from the way that I say things sometimes. You know, not a lot of people, because a lot of people really do get me. But, you know, and I've been open about the fact that I've donated to GoFundMe's. I've given people money before. Like, I'm not a person who ever loans money, because I feel like loaning money is a ticket to not being friends anymore. So I will not loan anybody money, but I will give people money and that will a lot of times lead me to getting them getting them partially to where they need to be. But even though some people may see that as like a bad thing, to me, it's a good thing, because let me give you an example, and let's use dollar amounts here, you know. Let's say life is being good and I'm not really worried about anything. All bills are paid. It's a sunny day in my life. And then a friend comes to me and says, I'm struggling right now and I need to borrow $300. Well, I'm not going to give you $300. I'll tell you that. But what I will do, unless we're super close, then maybe. But what I will do, come to think of it, I gave somebody $300 not too long ago. But anyway, yeah, so I'm a liar. That's what we need to know. That's a big thing we need to know, is I'm a liar. Every once in a while, I accidentally will lie, because I'll be like, wait a second, I did do that after all. But okay, so let's start over. Let's say that a friend comes to me. I love starting over and actually starting over. It's such an obnoxious thing to do. But yeah, so a friend comes to me and says, I'm struggling, I need $300. And I'm like, in my head, like, I'm likely not going to give this person $300. So, you know, I'll hear out their story or whatever. And then I'll be like, okay, well, I can't loan you $300, because I'm not going to be rude to them, you know, and say it in a like bitchy way. Like, you know, girl, $300 isn't happening. But I will say, like, you know, I can't afford to loan you $300 right now, but what I can do is give you $75. Like I said, some people will think that that's rude of me, especially if I have the $300, but those people aren't going to make up for that money if that person doesn't pay me back. That's one thing. And also, I would rather just give you $75, which I know that I can afford to part with at that moment and not ever think about it again, than have to turn into a bill collector and keep asking you about this $300. And then eventually, when you don't pay me back, cutting you off completely, and now we no longer have a friendship. So I will tell you at any given time how close I can get you to where it is you need to be. And honestly, sometimes it's nothing. And I will say that in the nicest way possible. But sometimes I know, like I told you guys, last week we were talking about it. I think it was when I said that I was planning my move and somebody had asked me for some amount of money. And it was just like, you know, I wasn't able to do it. But yeah, you know, sometimes you just can't. It's like understandable. I get it, you know. I mean, like that's like I'm a very real person when it comes down to it. People sometimes get this idea of me that I'm this monster, and I'm just like I I don't understand the people that truly are like that. But the people that truly are like that, I'll tell you what I've noticed. The people that truly are what you would consider monsters, and I've met a few in my life. I don't make it a point to hang out with them. Actually, I make it a point not to hang out with them. But like true monsters are usually really good at making everybody think that they're nice people. That's what I've noticed about really, not good people. And then there was this one time where I had an ex get mad at me because his sister-in-law's cousin had been kidnapped in Mexico, and she hit us up because they were hitting the whole family up to put together money to rescue him, to pay the ransom, and that's a very unfortunate situation. But literally, we had just moved into another apartment, and the apartment was significantly more than we had been paying before. This was like 6 or 7 years ago, maybe even closer to 8 years ago. And the apartment was significantly more than we had been paying. And he was tapped, and so that meant that I would have been the one that had to just give them money. And I don't know these people. I didn't know that's his sister-in-law. I didn't know her. And so I just had to say no. And I remember him seeming like he was mad at me because I said no. But it's just sort of like, I'm not giving money to people that I don't know and gonna cross my fingers and hope that they pay me back. And then, and at that time, me and him weren't having any problems. So I wasn't really worried about us breaking up. But at the same time, it does cross my mind, if we break up, then I have no connection to these people. Then I really have no connection to these people. There's no way that I can get at them to get my money. And also, they're probably not going to give it back anyway at that point because they're like, well, you're no longer with so-and-so. And so, but I say all this to say that, so many people hear things in my videos that just aren't there, and there was a woman the other day that was talking about me being racist. And it was just sort of like, all right, well, two things. One, I'm not racially sensitive in any way. And you could say that I'm racially insensitive. That's something I would definitely accept that if somebody said that I was racially insensitive. I'm insensitive in a lot of ways in the way that I phrase things. So yeah, you can say that I'm racially insensitive. But racist, that's not really something that you can say about me, especially from the things that I've said, and especially when you consider that the way that we even got on the road that we're on right now is when black people were specifically asking, because Kamala didn't get voted into office and Jasmine Crockett, ended up not moving on in the primary, it was James Tallarico instead. And so a bunch of black influencers and just black content creators in general were asking why Latinos didn't vote for Kamala or Jasmine Crockett respectively. And so because maybe sometimes I'm a little too literal. I don't understand people are being rhetorical. But I honestly felt like there were enough people that were perplexed about this that I could help out. And, as far as telling you what it is that keeps us from voting the way that, and why the things that we do that doesn't make sense to a lot of people doesn't compute for you. And so that's what I started. That's originally the first video that I made. And then I had so many people get mad at me, and it wasn't my followers. Like, I didn't start losing subscribers or any of that kind of stuff. It wasn't like that. But it was a situation where, I had people in the comments that were really trying to press me and make it seem like I was being a particular way. And that's where I got very much like, oh yeah, I really need to drive this home for you then. Because I don't think you understand that the parts that I said in that video about people just being done with being guilt tripped and being told that they owe people their votes just because of their skin color, that's what you're not understanding. Is that we're done with that. Like, we're talking about people wanting money or needing money. If a friend comes to me and asks me for money, or if I can loan them or give them money, and they just tell me their story, then, you have the same odds of getting it no matter who you are. But if you come to me and you were to say something like, because I'm black, this is something that you should do for me, you are getting $0 from me. If you come to me as a fellow Latino and you're saying, well, because you're Latino and I'm Latino, I mean, really, you should help. You're getting $0 from me. I don't care who you are. Once you bring that up and try to make it seem like I owe you something because of your skin color, your ethnicity, or any of that stuff, that's where I will just be like, no, nobody owes you anything because of any of that. Nobody owes you any undying loyalty because of what you think your ancestors may have done in past generations. Or what our connection would be as far as, the same skin color or generations back coming from the same place or whatever it is you're trying to do. That's not the way my thinking works. So yeah, I mean, and there has been a lot of that. And it was it's very similar to the way that things went down with the trans community. Trans community started off very basic. It was just actual transsexuals, either female to male or male to female, just wanting the same treatment as everybody else, wanting the same chance as anybody else. And since I came up with a lot of trans people, I know what that struggle is, and I know that there was a point when they were facing a lot of discrimination and they couldn't live normal lives, and some people would say that they don't deserve to live normal lives because they're not presenting in a normal way. I personally don't agree with that. I think as long as a person is otherwise, morally upstanding and not doing anything creepy and not be I feel like those people should have the same chances as any of us do to have employment and to be able to live in society and not have people, physically or even verbally threaten, harass, assault, any of that. I just feel that's the way I feel about it, But then it became a thing of the trans activists and the new school trans people turning it into this everybody owes them a particular kind of treatment and everybody owes them access to these spaces and everybody owes it. And it's no, none of that is owed to you. None of that is owed to you. You're trying to tell me that you look like me, but you identify as non-binary. So now you're trans and you belong in the women's bathroom, but you look like me. And you also have the same parts as I do. But you're telling me that we as a society, and more specifically women, owe you to be in the bathroom. No, not in the women's bathroom. That bathroom is for women. What we do owe you is access to a bathroom, which we all have access to a bathroom, male or female, anything in between. We all have access to a bathroom. It may not be the bathroom that you want it to be, but you do have access to a bathroom. So even though you may not feel the most comfortable with it for I don't know what reason, because to the rest of us, you look like you belong in the men's bathroom, you do have access to a bathroom. It's just not the bathroom you want. But some of these people will try to argue us into we owe you. And then that's another place that we supposedly owe them. You know, because they claim that the first people at Stonewall were trans, every gay person automatically owes them loyalty. But then you take a person like me that's actually done the research on all of that, and really, I need to put out some more gay history videos coming up, and that's going to happen because we've got Pride Month coming up. And so I'm going to take that opportunity to, and it's not going to be all I do. I'm going to continue to do different things. And pretty soon I'll be off of this particular run that I'm on right now. I just have a few points I have to make. And then, you know, like my goal has always been, and if you pay attention to my channel, even though like, you know, I'll make like 2 or 3 videos in a row that'll be like trans or ice, like that's the other thing a lot of people don't get. They're like, you do nothing but make videos about black people. No, the only time you tune in is when I make videos about black people. Like if you pay attention, I made a lot of videos on trans. I made a lot of videos on like Trump and politics. I've made a lot of videos on ICE. I've made a lot of videos on like, you know, like I try to do everything. There's certain things that I haven't gotten to yet, but it's not because I don't plan to, you know. And then that's the other thing. Like sometimes people will be like, well, why don't you talk about white people more? Why don't you talk about white people? Why? Like you have the same kind of access to YouTube that I do. You would go through the exact same upload process that I do. So if you feel like that's something that I'm not talking about, and at that point in time, you might be right. I may not have talked about that. Then that's what you need to do. You know, I mean, like, I did a couple of videos on that woman that was harassing the older lady at Target. Now, the focus of that wasn't the fact that she was a white woman, but the lady that was harassing that I was not on the side of, she was white. I mean, she had a Latino last name, but she was white. You know, I don't know if she got married in the last name or what it was, but she was white. But it's like nobody bothered noticing that. So when you're telling me that I'm not making videos about particular groups, well, let me explain to you why that might be. And let's use that as the example. When it came to the lady that was harassing the lady at Target that was wearing the Charlie Kirk shirt, like I said, that woman that was harassing her was white. I didn't see a bunch of white people in my comments telling me that because she was white, that I shouldn't call her out, or that she was right to do that because she was white. It was the opposite. People just agreed that she was being an asshole. Now, when it comes to the stories that I've covered as far as black people have gone, in each one of those stories, it has always been a fair amount of black people online. Well, the majority online, even if that's not really what it was in real life, but the majority online making excuses for these people and telling us that we were wrong for judging these people, and that not only were they making excuses and that we were wrong for judging these people, but telling us that we were supposed to support these people? Well, that's the difference right there. Is that the other one that somebody brought up the other day was because I was talking about George Floyd. And then somebody was like, well, why don't you feel this way about Dylan Roof? Well, I never saw anybody claiming that Dylan Roof was any kind of hero. If you guys don't remember Dylan Roof had, like, you know, unalived all those black people in that church. I don't remember if it was 9 or 8 or whatever. Horrible story, you know? And I remember when I first heard about that, I remember everybody thinking that was horrible and it was a tragedy. But I didn't see white people saying, you know, I saw some black people saying that if he had been black, he wouldn't have been taken alive. I thought that was petty and unnecessary because he wasn't armed at the time, and like that's the way it goes. You know, like if you really do an apples to apples comparison of some of these people or these situations that they'll compare, they really aren't apples to apples. You know, it really is apples to oranges, or at the very least, you know, Washington bread to, you know, or Washington Delicious, whatever it is, to Granny Smith, you know. So it might have been still apples, but they're different kinds of apples. And so it's different, you know. I mean, like, because with Dylan Roof, I didn't see any white people saying, like, you know, oh, he had so much else he could do, and instead he's going to be in prison now. I saw everybody just being like, yeah, that was a horrible thing to do. Nobody that I saw, no white people that I saw, and yeah, I admit it, I know plenty of white people. There's going to be plenty of white people in my orbit. It's what it is. I know a lot of white people. So I can honestly say that none of the white people that I was seeing were saying that this was a tragedy and Dylan Roof shouldn't be, I mean, as far as Dylan Roof being arrested. I mean, like, everybody seemed to agree that it was a tragedy as far as those people losing their lives, and especially under the circumstances that they lost their lives. They were in church, you know, but, you know, but I didn't see any white people saying, like, you know, I really feel like they should have gone easier on Dylan Roof, or he shouldn't be in prison. No, everybody just agreed that that was terrible and let the justice system take care of him however they need to take care of him, you know, and that was it. But then you take, you know, people like George Floyd, and, you know, Mike Brown was another one, and all of the Black Lives, almost all of the Black Lives Matter. Philando Castile was one I thought always should have, like, I feel like Black Lives Matter should have capitalized on the Philando Castile story. But, you know, they just didn't, and I don't know why. I would like to talk to somebody that was in Black Lives Matter, dealt with Black Lives Matter, and find out why they didn't, because to me, that one was such a, like, I really feel like they could have gotten a lot of people to at least see see things their way to a certain degree if they knew how to talk to people. But a lot of the activists for the black community, as far as Black Lives Matter and groups like that goes, the black activists, they don't know how to talk to people. And, you know, the black people that are supposedly, you know, wanting that change or wanting to see people have a particular reaction, they don't know how to do what they're trying to do. Like, it is like that saying, you know, you attract more flies with honey than vinegar. And, like, you know, a lot of these people are just giving vinegar and wondering why they're not getting honey results. And it's like, because you're using vinegar. Because every time you have a chance to actually work your way into somebody's heart, to actually have somebody see things the way that you would like them to see them, instead of appealing to that softer side of them, which is maybe at that moment open, you go straight for the, well, what do you have to say now? And it's like, okay, well, now nobody's going to see it your way. Like, really, nobody's going to see it your way. Like, even when you really don't agree with people or haven't agreed with people for a long time, if you want to get them on your side and to see you in a particular way, which what a lot of people want to be seen as is like the human, even if they don't realize it, it's the human side of you that you want people to see so that they're open to you. But instead, you want to show them the combative side of you, because to you, that strength is being combative. But really, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is be vulnerable with people. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is actually tell people why something hurts you rather than attacking them about not even being the person that hurt you. Because that's the way you're taking it, is that these people are intentionally hurting you. And sometimes it's not that at all. Sometimes you're just not expressing yourself. And this is where some people get mad at me, because they'll be like, well, I shouldn't have to express myself in any particular way for people to see me as a human being. Okay, you're right. Stay unbothered.